Welcome to the video. So I do think there's two sides to photography. You have the artistic, the creative side, and then you also have the more documentary side of things. The two will mix, but I do think you are pushed to go out and photograph based on one or the other. Me personally, I mostly pursue it as an artistic pursuit. But every now and again, I wish just to go out and photograph and place an event purely to document it. And today is just that. You see, deep in the woods there lies this art installation that I've visited many times throughout my life. But I've never taken a proper image of it, just some holiday snaps. So it's time to fix that. So let's see if we can find this place. The location we are headed for today isn't technically legal, and therefore not marked on the official tourist maps. But there are some nice end markings on the trees that you can follow to find this place. After a short walk, you'll find yourself at the gate of the Royal Republic of Landonia. Trickier to get down here than I remembered. Anyhow, we made it. We're going to try and make a couple of images of this quite special place. So I have two problems with this location. The first one being it's kind of tricky to get around because all the rocks quite uneven, to put it mildly. Secondly, kind of hard finding a place where you can put a tripod. And I do plan on taking one like hero image on large format and then a couple of other images with the pinhole camera. Let's see what we can make of it. Sometimes you just need to keep it simple. I'm stood at the same rock as before, looking straight on the structure here. It's kind of like the gate towards it. Nestled among the trees there, I think it will look quite nice on the image. Two exposures, one on Fomapan 200 and one on Retropan 320, both rated for ISO 200 though. So it's shot at the f/22 and 1/2 of a second. We have a problem though. The sun has started to drop. It's about an hour until sunset, but the sun is setting behind the cliff there, so we are losing light. There's still some ambient light around, so I'm going to have a walk around here and see if I can find any more compositions. But I think we'll stick with the large format for today. We'll have to try out the pinhole another day. Might actually work. I kind of like the opening here and the tower in the background there to the left, leading line. Not too keen about the vegetation to the left, but might work. Might be worth setting up the camera. Yeah, let's try it. 2 exposures this time as well, Fomapan 200 and Retropan, just as before and rated as ISO 200, both of them. But we've lost about 2 stops of light, so this time around it was f16 and 1 second. I just focus in on the opening there or the gate, and I think it will be fine, technically speaking. Compositionally, I actually like this one better than one before, but we'll see when I have the film developed, as always. And with that, it is time to start heading back to the car. Autumn always kind of creeps up on me, and I keep forgetting how soon the sun sets at this time of year. And I don't want to do that hike in complete darkness, even though I packed a head torch just in case. Time to head home. That was a fun little outing. Now it's time to develop some film. And when it comes to large format, I use the Yobo Multitank 2 number 2520 with the insert reel for 4x5 and 9x12. And that's actually the reason why I went with the Yobo tank, because I shoot both of those formats. But there's plenty of options out there, especially for 4x5, and I'm sure most of them will work just fine. With this though, to load it, you take the reel, you take your exposed film, in complete darkness, with the margin side facing inwards, you just follow the little slot to load the reel. I do this manually, and it's fairly easy to do. But Yobo also sells a contraption you can buy to make loading the reel even easier. But I've never felt a need to buy that. Once you loaded the film, one sheet on each side, you take these little inserts, place one here and one here. And that's to help keeping the film in place, but also distributing the chemicals if you are doing rotation developing. And then there's also a little insert for the middle to keep the whole thing light tight. Once you loaded the reel, it's ready for the canister. Like so. And then the lid just snaps in place. Ready for developing. Speaking of which, I do manual rotation developing when it comes to large format, for which I have this, a little DIY contraption. A piece of wood, 4 furniture wheels, a little stop, on which I can do my rotations. Like so. It works completely fine. Yobo actually makes a thing you can buy for manual rotations, and I did buy that. However, it was a bit wobbly for me and my small tank. And I found this to actually work better, so I just returned that. With that said, time to develop some actual film. To help me keep track of my film holders, I mark the film holders I've loaded, and I then cross it over when I've unloaded the film holders. That way I know which film holders are loaded and which are not. I set the timer and I develop for the specified time found on the massive developing chart for roll and whatever film I'm developing. It's usually advised that you should reduce the developing time by 10 to 20% when you're doing rotary developing. However, as I'm pre-soaking the film, that will actually hinder the chemicals to reach the film and therefore actually reducing the total developing time. That has worked quite well for me. And by the way, you might notice that I don't check the temperatures of my chemicals or the water. Not because temperature isn't important, but I figured that the ambient temperature is around 20 degrees Celsius. And therefore the chemicals will be around 20 degrees as well. And that has worked quite well for me, and I'm getting consistent results. But you are welcome to be as anal as you wish with that. Then we start to roll for 7.5 minutes, change the direction every half minute or so. After that, it's time for the stop bar. I use plain old tap water for that, and just a few normal inversion, and let it sit for a minute or so. Meanwhile, I discard the used Rodonol, as that is a one-stop developer. Time for the fixer, and I do rotary fixing as well, for about 2 to 4 minutes. And currently I'm using Foma Fix. Afterwards, I pour back the used fixer in the bottle and reuse it. I mark it on the bottle and start checking the fix after 5 to 10 uses by doing a clear test with the leader from my 135 roll. Time to wash the film, and once again I use plain old tap water, but I do a variation of the Ilford washing routine. I fill the tank and do 10 inversions, replace the water and do another 15 inversions, and finally replace the water once more and do 20 inversions. Afterwards I dump the water, fill up the tank once more, and add a few drops of rinse aid for the dishwasher to help with the drying. Finally, I get the first look of the images, and I then place the film in this drying rack I found on a Swedish auction site, and let it dry for a few hours. Welcome to the darkroom. This is kind of rough around the edges, but I like it. And we're going to print the images on paper now. And to do so, I'm going to use this, my big birthday enlarger for 4x5. It's a Dus Laburator 1000. What a name for an enlarger. I also have this. This is an Agfa Veriscope 60, which I use for the smaller formats, so 120 and 35mm. I've been using the Agfa quite extensively and know that enlarger quite well. However, I'm still fairly new to the Durst. I've only put a couple images through that, so it needs to see a bit more use. And well, I brought all the 4 images from the day, so both the Fomapan and the Retropan images are here, because I want to compare the two stocks on paper. Speaking of which, I thought we'd do some fiber prints today, and my go-to paper for fiber, that's this one. This is Foma Broom Variant 112. It's a matte, quite nice paper, and it is very affordable. However, I've run out of that paper. So instead, we are going to use this, some Ilford paper I had lying around. So let's get to printing. I don't have any plumbing in my darkroom, so I pour up some water in a bigger tray for washing after fixing. I then pour up the stock, the developer and the fixer, of course. Currently I'm using chemicals from Bellini that are supposed to be eco-friendly. These get mixed and put in glass bottle. I note when I mix the chemicals, and I keep track of how much paper I put through the chemicals, so I have some sort of idea of how fresh they are. But I don't have a good way of testing the chemicals out in the darkroom, and I do worry sometimes that the fixer might go bad. Today though, we are using fresh chemicals.
Deras artist på P3 Guld. Artisten vars Blom-referenser hörs i både artistnamnet och i låttitlarna. Här är Where Flowers Grow. I start with a test strip and then another and then a swatch to find the base exposure and what contrast I like. Keeping notes of what the hell I'm doing.
this is probably the most important step out in the darkroom, finding the base exposure and what hardness of the paper wish to use. Once you've found that, time for the first proper print. After the printing session, it's time to properly wash the prints. If this had been RC paper or plastic paper, we'd just have rinsed them off in the tap for a few minutes. But this was fiber, so we need to wash them a bit more properly. What I do is I just leave them in some trays with water with the emulsion side facing downwards for at least 90 minutes, replacing the water a few times. After at least 90 minutes, I flip them over so that the emulsion side faces upwards and leave them there for an additional 30 minutes. This washing routine is based on a video by Lina Bessenova. If you're interested in that, I'll link that in the description. After washing the prints, I'll just leave them in the trays to dry overnight. This gives me fairly curly prints, but what I do then is I dab some water on the backside of the print and put them in this dry machine I have, that I don't know the English name for, and I don't have any cord for that. But I let the emulsion side facing the fabric and leave them there for overnight. That gives me, well, flat enough prints for me. A quick warning though, if you are going to try that yourself, make sure the fabric is clean so you don't get any residues on your prints. I finally get my prints. It is a slow process. From the darkroom to the ready-made prints, it took me a few days. And I find some strange enjoyment in that slow process. I should probably add that I'm not a master printer. I'm still trying to figure stuff out myself. However, I hope this might inspire someone to take up darkroom printing. I find it to be a fun and very tactile way of seeing and developing your images. And it kind of completes that analog workflow, at least for me. And it is fairly easy to do, even fiber printing, if you don't muck around too much. However, if you've never done it before, I might suggest to start with the RC or plastic paper. It is a bit easier to work with, because it has two key benefits. It's easier to wash, just a few minutes under the tap, and it dries flatter, giving you the results a bit quicker. But I like the fuss with fiber paper. And for me, fiber also has two key benefits. It's a bit easier to tone and to spot or retouch if that's necessary. I did print both Fomapan and Retropan, and I must say the differences are less than I expected. I can actually only tell them apart because I did burn the top right corner of the Retropan image. Besides that, I can't spot any differences. And the same can be said about the negatives. The only way I can tell them apart is because the Retropan negative is slightly denser than the Fomapan, as I underrated that film. And I do have a theory that the bigger the negative gets, the less the film matters. I'm not saying there's no differences at all, I'm saying film might matter less than what I was led to believe. Of course, I've only done this test on this fairly flat scene, and quite small prints. On a more dynamic scene or on larger print, the differences might be greater. But I do think the differences between film stocks are a bit overrated. Enough about the technical aspects. How about the images themselves? Am I pleased? Partly. They are decent documentary images, just what I set out to accomplish. But they lack a bit of oomph. They are a bit grey and flat. And I do like the second composition better than the first one. The first one has that big rock in the foreground that kind of hinders the viewer. The second one works better. But it is a tad boring if I'm honest. I might try and fix that in the darkroom in the future, adding a bit of contrast with a harder paper, doing some dodging and burning, etc. But for now, that image needs to rest, and I need to figure out if I like it enough to try and, well, bring life to it. Anyhow, I am glad to have a proper image of this place now, because it is very special. It was constructed by an artist called Lars Vilks in the late 1980s. The artwork itself is called Nimis and consists out of driftwood and stands in a nature preserve, and was built without any permits. And therefore it's faced demolition threats from the county ever since they discovered it about a year after it was built. But it has been left standing and grown quite popular, and is today a fairly popular tourist attraction. Lars Vilks himself maintained the structure and added to it throughout the years. However, he did die a few years ago. It is still maintained by a group of friends to the artist, but I do wonder what will happen with it in a few years' time. Threats from the counties still exist, storms happen, etc, etc. I do wonder if it will be left standing in like 10-20 years. We'll see what happens with it. Anyhow, I am glad to have a few images of the place now. With that said, thank you so much for watching. See you next time, take care and bye.